The wind screamed across the Afghan valley at 43 kilometers per hour, gusting to 52, and Staff Sergeant Maya Chun had exactly 107 seconds before the SEAL team below her position would be overrun. Through her scope, she could see Commander Reeves dragging Lieutenant Park behind a crumbling wall, blood trailing in the dust. 3 more SEALs were pinned in a dried riverbed 2,400 meters away. The distance alone made the shot nearly impossible. The wind made it suicide, and every Marine on this firebase had already written those men off as dead. But Maya Chun had spent 11 years preparing for impossible shots that everyone else called suicide, and she had no intention of letting another soldier die on her watch. The memory of Private Hannah Torres still woke her at 3 in the morning. The training accident had happened 16 months ago at Camp Pendleton, and the official report had cleared Chun of any wrongdoing. Equipment failure, they had called it. A freak occurrence. But Chun still saw Torres's face every time she closed her eyes, still heard the crack of the rifle malfunction, still felt the weight of a promising young Marine dying before she could reach her. Torres had been the first woman in Chun's advanced sniper course to show real promise, the kind of natural talent that came along once in a career. She had reminded Chun of herself at that age, hungry to prove that gender meant nothing behind a scope. That was why Chun had volunteered to mentor Private Rebecca Walsh, despite already carrying a full instructor load at the Scout Sniper School. Walsh was struggling, not with the shooting, but with the constant undercurrent of doubt from the male instructors, the whispered questions about whether women belonged in sniper training at all. Chun had lived that doubt for over a decade. She knew exactly what Walsh needed to hear. The morning before her deployment orders came through, Chun had found Walsh behind the barracks at Camp Lejeune, fighting back tears after failing her 3rd qualification attempt. The young private had looked up with red eyes and said she was done, that maybe everyone was right, that maybe she should just request a transfer to administration. Chun had sat down beside her in the North Carolina heat and told her about the worst shot she had ever missed. It was during her first deployment to Helmand Province, a Taliban commander at 1,800 meters, perfect conditions, and she had rushed the trigger pulled by a fraction of a second. The round had gone wide by 3 inches. 3 inches that had allowed that commander to escape and plan an attack that killed 2 Marines the following week. Chun had carried those deaths for months, convinced she did not deserve to hold a rifle. You know what my instructor told me? Chun had said to Walsh. He told me that the rifle does not care what anyone thinks about who is holding it. The rifle only cares about the fundamentals. Breathing, position, trigger control, wind reading. You master those, and every doubt they throw at you becomes just noise. Walsh had looked at her with something like hope beginning to replace the despair. Chun had spent the next 3 hours on the range with her, breaking down every element of her shooting position, correcting the tiny flaws that were costing her accuracy. By sunset, Walsh had fired her best group of the entire course. Before we dive into the rest of this story, drop a comment and let us know what state you're watching from. Maybe you have witnessed similar acts of courage where you are from. The next morning, Chun had been called to the office of Master Gunnery Sergeant Wade Kramer. He was waiting for her with his arms crossed, his jaw set in that expression of barely concealed contempt that she had learned to recognize over the years. Kramer was a legend in the Scout sniper community, a man with 43 confirmed kills and 28 years of service. He was also the loudest voice in the ongoing argument that women had no place in combat sniper roles. I hear you have been spending extra time with Private Walsh, Kramer had said, not bothering with pleasantries. She needed help with her fundamentals. Chun had replied evenly. I provided it. Kramer had stood and walked to where Chun's custom rifle was secured in the office armory. He had lifted it, examining the modifications she had made over years of refinement. The stock was adjustable in ways that standard-issue rifles were not. The scope was a different manufacturer than regulation. The bipod was lighter, the trigger pull customized to her exact specifications. This Barbie gun of yours, Kramer had said, his voice dripping with derision. You really think this toy is going to perform in actual combat conditions? That toy has a confirmed kill at 1,947 meters, Chun had said quietly. In Kandahar, in 40-kilometer winds. Kramer had set the rifle down harder than necessary. Anyone can get lucky once, Staff Sergeant. But you're teaching these girls that they can customize their way to competence. You're filling their heads with ideas that are going to get them killed in the field. I'm teaching them proper technique, Chen had said. The same technique that has kept me alive through 3 deployments. Kramer had stepped closer, close enough that she could smell the coffee on his breath. You want to know what I think? I think you're so desperate to prove that women belong in this community that you are lowering standards. I think Private Walsh should have washed out weeks ago, and you're propping her up because of some misguided sisterhood nonsense. Chen had felt the familiar anger rising in her chest, the same anger she had learned to suppress through years of dealing with men like Kramer. She had kept her voice level professional. Private Walsh has the same physical qualifications as any male Marine in the course. She meets every standard we set, standards that have been dropping for years. Kramer had shot back. And now we have got women playing with custom rifles, thinking they're going to be heroes. Your job is to train snipers, not babysit recruits who cannot hack it. Chen had left that office with her hands shaking, not from fear, but from the effort of maintaining her composure. She had been dealing with Kramer's attitude for the entire 3 years. She had been an instructor, but it was getting worse. He seemed personally offended by every woman who entered the sniper program, as if their very presence was an insult to his legacy. What Chen did not know then was that Kramer had already made a decision about her future. 2 days later, when her deployment orders to Afghanistan came through, she had been surprised by the timing. She was not scheduled for rotation for another 6 months. The orders had been specific. She was to serve as a training liaison at Forward Operating Base Hendricks, helping to mentor Afghan National Army snipers. It was only when she arrived at Camp Lejeune's Deployment Processing Center that Captain James Martinez had pulled her aside. Martinez was a SEAL liaison officer, one of the few men in the special operations community who had always treated Chen with straightforward respect. You know this deployment is bullshit, right? Martinez had said quietly. Chen had looked at him sharply. What are you talking about? Martinez had glanced around to make sure they were not overheard. Kramer pulled strings to get you sent to Hendricks. It is a safe posting, no real combat operations. You will be stuck training Afghan recruits who barely speak English while the actual sniper missions go to other units. The realization had hit Chen like a physical blow. Why would he do that? Martinez had given her a look that said she already knew the answer. Because you are good, Staff Sergeant. You're really good. And every time you succeed, every time you prove what a woman can do with a rifle, it makes his whole worldview look like the dinosaur thinking it is. This way, he gets you out of the instructor pool and stuck in a position where you cannot build your reputation. Chen had felt something cold settle in her stomach. Can I fight it? Martinez had shaken his head. Orders are orders. And Kramer has friends at high places. You push back on this, and he will make sure your career hits a wall. But, he had added, his voice dropping even lower, I will be a Hendricks too. SEAL Team 6 is running operations in that sector. If something comes up where we need a real sniper, I will make sure the right people know you are available. Now, standing in the Afghan heat with her deployment barely 2 weeks old, Chen understood that Kramer's plan had worked perfectly. She had been relegated to endless days of teaching basic marksmanship to Afghan soldiers who would likely never see combat, while real operations happened without her. Her custom rifle, the one Kramer had mocked as a Barbie gun, sat unused in her quarters. But something felt wrong today. She could not shake the feeling that had been building since morning. SEAL Team 6 had deployed on a high-risk reconnaissance mission into the valley systems south of the firebase, and the radio chatter had been steady all day. Then, an hour ago, the chatter had stopped. Just silence on the frequencies. The kind of silence that usually meant something had gone very, very wrong. Chen found Martinez in the Tactical Operations Center 20 minutes later, his face grim as he studied the digital map display. The TOC was a climate-controlled bunker filled with communications equipment and monitoring stations, a stark contrast to the 110-degree heat outside. 3 other officers clustered around Martinez, their voices low and tense. We have got a situation, Martinez said when he saw Chen. He did not waste time with preliminaries. Team 6 went dark 40 minutes ago. Last transmission indicated they were taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Chun felt her pulse quicken. What is their location? Martinez pointed to a spot on the map, a valley system approximately 8 kilometers south of their position. They were conducting reconnaissance on a suspected Taliban command structure. Intelligence said the compound was lightly defended. Intelligence was wrong. How many hostiles? Chun asked. Best estimate is 30 to 40 fighters. The team is pinned in a dry riverbed with minimal cover. We have got air support inbound, but the nearest Apache is 25 minutes out. By then, it might be too late. One of the other officers, a young Lieutenant Chun did not recognize, spoke up. We need sniper support for extraction. Someone who can provide cover while they move to the extraction point. Martinez looked at Chun, and she saw the calculation in his eyes. He knew what she was thinking before she said it. I can be in position in 15 minutes. The lieutenant shook his head. No offense, Staff Sergeant, but this requires someone with combat experience. Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer is already gearing up. He'll provide overwatch. Chun felt her jaw tighten. Kramer had not fired a shot in combat in over 3 years. He spent his time now doing inspections and evaluations, living off his reputation from deployments that were becoming ancient history. But she kept her voice professional. With respect, sir, I have 3 combat deployments and multiple confirmed kills at extended range. I can help. The lieutenant barely glanced at her. Kramer has 43 confirmed kills and nearly 30 years of experience. He will handle it. You can return to your duties with the ANA training program. Martinez opened his mouth to argue, but Chun caught his eye and gave a slight shake of her head. She knew how this worked. Pushing now would only make things worse. She left the TOC and walked across the firebase toward the barracks, her mind already racing through possibilities. She found Kramer at the armory, checking his rifle with the methodical precision of someone who had done it 10,000 times. He looked up as she approached, and something like amusement crossed his face. Come to wish me luck, Staff Sergeant? Chun ignored the mockery in his tone. The team is pinned at approximately 2,000 meters from the nearest viable overwatch position. Wind conditions in that valley system are going to be unpredictable. You will need to account for thermal updrafts and crosswinds that shift every few minutes. Kramer slung his rifle over his shoulder. I have been making shots since before you were born, Chun. I think I can handle a little wind. Why don't you go back to teaching the locals which end of the rifle the bullets come out of? He walked past her, and Chun stood there feeling the familiar impotent rage that came from being dismissed. She thought about Hannah Torres, about the funeral she had attended at Arlington National Cemetery. Torres had been from a small town in New Mexico, the first person in her family to join the military. Her parents had sat in the front row, her mother clutching the folded flag, her father's face carved from stone. Chun had tried to speak to them afterward, to tell them how much promise their daughter had shown, but the words had stuck in her throat. What could she say? That Torres had died because of equipment that should have been replaced? That the Marine Corps had cleared Chun of responsibility, but Chun had not cleared herself? She walked to the small cemetery plot at the edge of the firebase where 3 Marines from previous engagements were buried. She came here sometimes when the weight of everything became too much. The graves were simple, marked with wooden crosses that would eventually be replaced with proper headstones. She sat down in the dust beside the newest one, a lance corporal who had died in an IED attack 6 weeks ago. I can make that shot, she said quietly to the empty air. I know I could, but knowing was not enough. In the Marine Corps, ability mattered less than opportunity, and Kramer had spent years making sure women like Chun never got the opportunities they needed. She had done some digging after Martinez told her about the deployment manipulation. What she found had turned her stomach. Over the past 8 years, Kramer had served on evaluation boards for 7 female Marines trying to enter sniper training. All 7 had been rejected, despite meeting or exceeding the physical and technical standards. 2 had filed formal complaints. Both complaints had disappeared into the bureaucratic machinery without resolution. Chun had also discovered why. Kramer's daughter, Emily, had tried to become a Marine 8 years ago. She had washed out of boot camp after 3 weeks, unable to meet the physical requirements. According to the unofficial stories Chun had pieced together from other instructors, Emily Kramer had blamed the Marine Corps for setting impossible standards, had accused her drill instructors of being too harsh. And Wade Kramer, instead of accepting that his daughter simply was not cut out for military service, had decided that the problem was not Emily's lack of capability, but the fact that women were being allowed to try it all. It was twisted logic, but Chun had seen it before. Men who felt threatened by capable women always found ways to rationalize their prejudice. They claimed they were protecting standards, preserving tradition, maintaining combat effectiveness. What they were really protecting was their own sense of superiority. Chen's radio crackled. "All personnel, this is TOC. SEAL Team 6 remains under heavy fire. Extraction operation is underway. Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer is in position providing overwatch support." She stood and walked quickly back toward the TOC. She knew she should not go, knew that showing up would only give Kramer more ammunition to use against her. But something in her gut told her this was going to go wrong. She had learned to trust that instinct over 11 years of service. When she reached the TOC, Martinez saw her and moved to intercept her before she could enter. His face was tight with stress. "You should not be here, Chun. How is it going?" she asked quietly. Martinez glanced back at the TOC entrance, then pulled her aside. "Not good. Kramer has taken 3 shots. All misses. He is blaming wind conditions, but the team is running out of time. They have got wounded, and the Taliban fighters are moving to flank their position." "Let me gear up," Chun said. "I can be in position in 10 minutes from a different angle. The western ridge would give me a better wind read." Martinez shook his head, but she could see he was wavering. "If I override the lieutenant and you miss, both our careers are done. If you miss and those SEALs die, we will be lucky to avoid prison. And if Kramer keeps missing and they die anyway." Chun asked, "What then?" Martinez's jaw worked as he struggled with the decision. Then they heard it, the sound that every Marine dreaded. The TOC radio erupted with urgent voices, controlled panic barely held in check. "Contact, heavy contact. We're being overrun. Need immediate support. Multiple wounded. Say again, we need support now." Martinez looked at Chun, and she saw the moment he made his choice. "Go. Western Ridge. I will deal with the fallback." Chun was already running. Chun grabbed her rifle from the armory and sprinted toward the western perimeter. The firebase at Hendricks was built into a hillside, giving it natural elevation over the surrounding valley systems. The western ridge Martinez had mentioned was a rocky outcropping that jutted out from the main defensive perimeter, offering an unobstructed view of the southern valleys. It was also exposed, vulnerable to counterfire, which was likely why Kramer had chosen the safer eastern position. She reached the ridge in 8 minutes, her lungs burning in the thin mountain air. 2 Marines from the perimeter guard watched her set up, their expressions confused but smart enough not to ask questions. Chun deployed her bipod and settled into position, her body automatically falling into the shooting stance she had practiced tens of thousands of times. Through her scope, the valley came into sharp focus. She could see the dry riverbed where the SEAL team was pinned, approximately 2,400 meters away. The distance was extreme but manageable. What made it nearly impossible was the terrain. The valley created a wind tunnel effect, and she could see dust devils dancing across the open ground, each one indicating a shift in wind direction and speed. She ranged the target area with her laser rangefinder. 2,417 meters. Elevation difference of 312 meters. She pulled out her data book and began calculating corrections, her hands steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Her radio crackled. "Chun, this is Martinez. What is your status?" "In position," she replied. "I have eyes on the target area, counting approximately 35 to 40 hostiles in a semicircle around the SEAL position. The team is in the riverbed, using a fallen wall section for cover. Can you make the shot?" Chun watched the dust patterns, reading the wind like a language she had spent years learning to speak. The gusts were coming in cycles, strong crosswinds from the west that lasted about 15 seconds, then a brief lull of 3 to 4 seconds before the next cycle. If she timed it perfectly, she could shoot during the lull. But at this distance, even a slight miscalculation would mean a miss by meters. Affirmative, she said. But I need you to relay my observations to the team. Tell them when I fire, they need to move immediately. I can give them a 30-second window, maybe 45 if the wind cooperates. Martinez paused. Kramer is still in position on the eastern ridge. He is saying he can make the shot if he gets one more chance. Chun felt anger flash through her, but she pushed it down. The SEALs did not have time for ego or politics. With respect, Captain, Kramer has had multiple chances. Those men are about to die. We can sort out the chain of command issues later. Another pause, longer this time. Then Martinez's voice came back, harder and more decisive. Agreed. Stand by for target priority. Chin scanned the hostile positions through her scope, identifying the greatest threats. There were 3 Taliban fighters with RPGs positioned on high ground overlooking the SEAL team's position. If those RPGs fired, the SEALs would be obliterated. Beyond them, she could see rifle fighters moving to flank the riverbed from the north. Priority targets are 3 RPG positions, she transmitted. Bearing 275 degrees from SEAL position, elevated approximately 20 meters above the valley floor. Secondary targets are the rifle squad attempting to flank from the north. She heard Martinez relay the information, then heard the SEAL team commander's response crackling through the radio. Understood. We are ready to move on your mark. Chun settled her breathing, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the zone that all snipers knew, that place of absolute focus where the world narrowed to nothing but the scope picture and the calculations running through her mind. Wind speed averaging 43 kilometers per hour with gusts to 52. Temperature 38 degrees Celsius. Barometric pressure dropping slightly. Bullet drop at this range would be approximately 18 meters. Wind drift in current conditions approximately 4.7 meters. She made the adjustments to her scope, her fingers moving with practiced precision. The first target came into her crosshairs, a Taliban fighter kneeling behind a rock with an RPG tube resting on his shoulder. He was shouting orders to other fighters, confident in his position, unaware that he was being watched from nearly 2.5 kilometers away. Chen's custom rifle felt familiar in her hands. Every modification she had made over the years, now proving its worth. The adjustable stock fit her frame perfectly. The trigger broke at exactly 1.8 pounds of pressure, the weight she had trained with for years. The scope was a Schmidt and Bender with custom turrets she had machined herself, marked in half-minute increments instead of the standard full-minute clicks. Kramer had called it a Barbie gun. What he did not understand was that every modification served a purpose born from experience, from lessons learned in mountains and deserts across 3 deployments. The rifle was not just a tool. It was an extension of her will, configured precisely to her specifications because she knew exactly what she needed to succeed. Stand by, she transmitted, preparing to engage. She watched the dust devils counting the cycles. Strong gust, 15 seconds. Lull for seconds. Gust, 14 seconds. Lull, 3 seconds. The pattern was holding. On the next lull, she would fire. The wind howled, then began to drop. Chen's finger moved to the trigger, taking up the slack. The crosshairs settled on the first RPG fighter's center mass. The wind fell to nearly nothing. She pressed the trigger. The rifle bucked against her shoulder, the suppressor reducing but not eliminating the sharp crack of the shot. For what felt like an eternity, but was actually 2.1 seconds, the bullet flew through the air, covering the distance while Chan was already cycling the bolt and acquiring the second target. Through her scope, she saw the first fighter drop, the RPG clattering from his hands. Before his body hit the ground, she had the second target in her crosshairs. Same calculations, same wind read, same perfect compression of will and skill into a single moment of violent precision. Second shot. The fighter fell. The third RPG position was already reacting, the fighter beginning to turn toward cover. Chen did not give him time. Third shot. He collapsed across the rocks. TOC, This is Chun. 3 targets eliminated. SEAL team has approximately 30 seconds before hostile forces regroup. She heard Martinez's voice, tight with controlled excitement. SEAL team is moving. They are displacing north toward the extraction point. But Chun was already scanning for new threats. The Taliban fighters were not running. They were experienced, disciplined. They were spreading out, finding cover, looking for the source of the shots that had just killed 3 of their men. And then she saw him, a figure in darker clothing moving between positions, clearly giving orders. A commander. She watched him for 3 seconds, confirming. Yes, the way the other fighters deferred to him, the way he moved with authority and purpose. This was someone important. TOC, I have what appears to be a high-value target. Adult male, dark clothing, commanding hostile forces from the western edge of the engagement area. Martinez came back immediately. Can you take the shot? Chun was already running the calculations. The target was moving, which added complexity. But he was moving in a predictable pattern, checking on his fighters' positions in sequence. If she could anticipate where he would be in 2.1 seconds, she could intercept him. Affirmative. Engaging now. She watched him move, counting his steps, calculating his pace. He would reach the gap between 2 rock formations in 4 steps. 3 steps. 2 steps. Chun fired. The commander dropped mid-stride, and the effect on the hostile forces was immediate. Confusion rippled through their positions. Some fighters began falling back. Others froze, unsure what to do without leadership. SEAL team reports they are clear of the kill zone. Martinez transmitted. They are moving to extraction point Delta. Well done, Chun. That was exceptional shooting. But Chun barely heard him, because on her radio, she could hear another voice, and it was filled with barely contained fury. Who authorized Staff Sergeant Chun to engage? Kramer demanded. I was in position. I had the shot. Martinez's response was ice cold. Your shots were missing master guns. Hers were not. Stand down and return to base. The SEAL team arrived at Firebase Hendricks 90 minutes later, dusty and bloodied, but alive. Chun watched from a distance as the medics rushed to treat their wounds. Commander Derek Reeves had taken shrapnel to his left shoulder. Lieutenant Joshua Park was limping badly, his leg wrapped in a hasty field dressing that was already soaked through with blood. Chief Petty Officer Michael Dawson had a gash across his forehead that would need stitches. The other 3 team members were battered but mobile. Chun remained at the western ridge, breaking down her rifle and packing her equipment with methodical care. She knew what was coming. She had disobeyed the chain of command, undermined Kramer's authority, and made him look incompetent in front of the entire Firebase command structure. The fact that she had saved 6 lives would matter less than the political fallout. Martinez found her as she was heading back to the armory. His face was unreadable in the fading light. Chun, Colonel Bradshaw wants to see you in his office immediately. Chun nodded. She had expected nothing less. How angry is he? Martinez hesitated. Kramer got to him first. He is claiming you violated protocols, endangered the mission with reckless shooting, and created a diplomatic incident by engaging without proper authorization. A diplomatic incident, Chun repeated flatly. I saved an American SEAL team from being massacred. I know that. You know that. But Kramer is spinning it differently. He is saying you could not have known the positive identification on those targets at that range, that you might have hit civilians or friendly forces, that you acted out of ego rather than tactical necessity. Chun felt something cold settle in her chest. And the colonel believes him? Martinez looked away. The colonel is old school. He served with Kramer in Fallujah back in 2004. They go way back. So Kramer has credibility that you, as a junior NCO with no political connections, do not have. What about the SEAL team? Chun asked. They know I saved them. Martinez's expression softened slightly. Commander Reeves is in surgery right now getting the shrapnel removed. But I spoke to Chief Dawson. He wants to testify on your behalf. He said those shots were the finest sniper work he has seen in 15 years of special operations. That might not be enough, Chun said quietly. No, Martinez agreed. It might not be. Colonel Bradshaw's office was in the main command building, a concrete structure that stayed marginally cooler than the surrounding tents and temporary buildings. Chun stood at attention while Bradshaw sat behind his desk, his face carved from granite. Kramer stood to the side, his arms crossed, his expression one of vindicated righteousness. Staff Sergeant Chun, Bradshaw began, his voice heavy with disappointment. Do you understand the severity of what you have done today? Sir, I engaged hostile forces that were in the process of overrunning an American Special Operations team. I eliminated 4 high-value targets and provided cover for their successful extraction. 0 friendly casualties resulted from my actions. Bradshaw's jaw tightened. You engaged without proper authorization. You were not assigned to that operation. Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer was the designated sniper support. You undermined his authority and created a command structure nightmare. Chun kept her voice level, professional. Sir, with respect, Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer had fired multiple shots without success. The SEAL team was seconds away from being overrun. I had a clear shot and the technical capability to execute. I made a tactical decision to preserve American lives. Kramer stepped forward, his voice sharp. You made a glory-seeking decision to showboat with that custom rifle of yours. You could not stand the thought of someone else getting credit, so you inserted yourself into an operation where you were not wanted or needed. That is not true, Chun said, her composure starting to crack. Those men were dying. Those men were in a fluid combat situation that required experienced judgment, Kramer shot back. You're a training instructor with exactly 0 high-value target engagement experience. You got lucky with some long-range shots, and now you think you are Annie Oakley. Chun turned to face him directly. I have 11 confirmed kills across 3 deployments at ranges exceeding 1,500 meters. My qualification scores are in the top 5th percentile of all Marine Corps snipers. I was not lucky today, Master Guns. I was prepared. Bradshaw held up a hand. Enough. Both of you stand down. Staff Sergeant Chun, the issue here is not your technical capability. The issue is that military operations require discipline and chain of command. You cannot have junior NCOs making independent decisions to override their superiors just because they think they know better. But sir, Chun began, then stopped herself. She could see in Bradshaw's face that the decision had already been made before she entered the room. Kramer had used his friendship, his history, his political capital. The outcome was predetermined. Bradshaw leaned back in his chair. I'm going to be frank with you, Staff Sergeant. If those SEALs had died, if your shots had missed and the situation had deteriorated, you would be facing a court-martial right now. As it is, you are being placed on administrative duty pending a formal investigation into your conduct. You are relieved of all training responsibilities and confined to base. Your rifle is to be surrendered to the armory immediately. Chun felt the words like a physical blow. Sir, you cannot be serious. I saved 6 American lives today, and you violated protocols doing it, Bradshaw said with finality. This is not a debate, Staff Sergeant. You are dismissed. Chun snapped a salute, held it until Bradshaw returned it, then turned on her heel and left. She made it exactly 15 steps outside the building before the rage and frustration overwhelmed her. She leaned against the concrete wall, her hands shaking, her vision blurring with tears she refused to let fall. Martinez found her there 10 minutes later. He did not say anything at first, just stood beside her in the darkness. Finally, he spoke. Commander Reeves is out of surgery. He's asking to see you. Chun looked at him. Why? Because he knows what you did, and he wants to thank you. They walked to the medical building together, neither speaking. The combat surgical hospital was a series of interconnected tents with actual air conditioning, a luxury reserved for the wounded. Commander Reeves was in a recovery bed, his shoulder heavily bandaged, and 4 running into his arm. His eyes were clear despite the pain medication. Staff Sergeant Chun, he said as she approached. His voice was rough but steady. Chief Dawson told me what happened at the colonel's office. That is unacceptable. Sir, you should be resting, Chun said. Reeves shook his head slightly. I have been in special operations for 17 years, Staff Sergeant. I have worked with snipers from every branch of the military. What you did today, those shots at that range in those conditions, I have never seen anything like it. You saved my team. You saved my life. I was just doing my job, sir. No, Reeve said firmly. You went above and beyond your job. You risked your career to save men you did not even know. That takes guts. That takes integrity. And I'm not going to let some dinosaur with a grudge destroy you for it. Sir, Chen began, but Reeve cut her off. I am putting in a formal commendation for your actions, and I am requesting that my team's after-action report be included in any investigation of your conduct. Every member of my team will testify that you acted appropriately, professionally, and with exceptional skill. Kramer can play his political games, but the facts are the facts. You are a hero, Staff Sergeant Chen. Do not let anyone tell you different. Chen felt her throat tighten. Thank you, sir. Reeve smiled slightly. Thank me by keeping that rifle of yours ready, because something tells me this is not over yet. And when things get bad again, I want the best sniper on this firebase on Overwatch. Not some washed-up has-been living off his reputation. Chen left the medical facility feeling marginally better. But as she walked back toward her quarters, she saw Kramer standing near the armory, watching her. The look on his face made it clear that he considered her a threat that needed to be neutralized. And in the military's political battlefield, Wade Kramer had 28 years of experience destroying careers. She had just made an enemy of the most dangerous kind, a powerful man who felt his authority had been challenged. And she knew from bitter experience that men like that did not forgive. They did not forget. They waited for their moment, and then they struck with everything they had. The formal investigation began 3 days later. Chen spent those days confined to base, stripped of her duties, watching other Marines go about their missions while she sat idle. Her rifle remained locked in the armory, surrendered as evidence. The loss of it felt like losing a limb. She had carried that weapon through 3 deployments, had made modifications and adjustments over hundreds of hours, had trusted it with her life and the lives of others. Now it sat in a storage locker while bureaucrats decided whether she had committed a crime by using it to save American soldiers. Martinez visited her on the second day with unofficial news. Kramer is pushing hard for an Article 15 at minimum, he said quietly. He wants you busted down in rank and potentially separated from service. He is calling your actions reckless endangerment and willful disobedience. Chen sat on her bunk, her hands clasped between her knees. What does the investigation team think? Martinez hesitated. The lead investigator is Major Helen Vargas from JAG. She is fair, has a reputation for being thorough, but she's also by the book. And by the book, you did violate the chain of command. Even to save lives? Chen asked. Even then, the military does not run on individual judgment calls. Chen, it runs on orders and structure. You know that. Chen looked up at him. If you were in my position, if you had that shot and knew men were dying, what would you have done? Martinez met her eyes. Honestly, the same thing you did. But I also would have expected to pay the price for it. Sometimes doing the right thing and following the rules are not the same thing. That night, Chen could not sleep. She kept seeing Hannah Torres's face, kept hearing the sound of the rifle malfunction that had killed her. Torres had trusted Chen, had looked up to her, had believed that if she worked hard enough and followed all the rules, she would succeed. And then she had died because of a mechanical failure that never should have happened. Chen had carried that guilt for 16 months. She had told herself that there was nothing she could have done, that equipment failures were unforeseeable, that she had followed every safety protocol. But deep down, she wondered if she could have caught it, if she had missed some sign during the pre-training inspection, if Torres's death was really just bad luck, or if it was Chen's failure. And now here she was, facing punishment for succeeding where she had once failed. She had saved 6 men, had executed shots that most snipers would never attempt, had proven that her skills and her custom rifle were not just adequate, but exceptional. And the Marine Corps was preparing to destroy her career for it. The formal hearing took place in a conference room that had been converted into a makeshift courtroom. Major Vargas sat at the head of the table, flanked by 2 other officers Chen did not recognize. Kramer was there as the primary witness against her. Colonel Bradshaw sat in observation, and to Chen's surprise, Commander Reeves was also present, his arms still in a sling, but his presence commanding despite his injuries. Major Vargas was a woman in her early 40s with steel-gray hair and eyes that missed nothing. She began by reading the charges against Chun, her voice crisp and professional. Staff Sergeant Maya Chun, you are accused of willful disobedience of a lawful order, reckless endangerment of friendly forces, and conduct unbecoming of a non-commissioned officer. How do you respond to these charges? Chun stood at attention. Not guilty, ma'am. Vargas made a note. Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer, please present your account of the events in question. Kramer stood and launched into his version of events. He described how he had been properly positioned to provide overwatch for the SEAL extraction, how he had been making careful, calculated shots in extremely difficult conditions, how Chun had inserted herself into the operation without authorization or proper coordination. His account made it sound like Chun had been a reckless cowboy looking for glory while he had been conducting a professional operation. And in your professional opinion, Master Gunnery Sergeant, were Staff Sergeant Chin's actions necessary? Vargas asked. Kramer shook his head. Absolutely not, ma'am. I had the situation under control. Another 30 seconds, and I would have neutralized the threats. Staff Sergeant Chin's intervention was premature and dangerous. At that range, she could not have properly identified her targets. She could have hit civilians or even friendly forces. The fact that she got lucky does not excuse the recklessness of her actions. Chun felt her jaw clench, but kept her expression neutral. Lucky! He was calling 4 precision shots at over 2,000 meters in shifting winds lucky. Vargas turned to Chun. Staff Sergeant Chun, you will have an opportunity to present your account. But first, I want to ask you directly, did you have authorization to engage those targets? Chun took a breath. No, ma'am. Captain Martinez gave me permission to move to the Western Ridge, but formal authorization to engage came from my own tactical assessment of the situation. So you made an independent decision to fire on targets without proper clearance through the chain of command? Chun met Vargas's eyes. Ma'am, the SEAL team was approximately 20 seconds from being overrun. Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer had fired multiple shots without effect. I had a clear line of sight, proper range estimation, and the technical capability to execute. The choice was between following bureaucratic protocol and saving American lives. I chose to save lives. Vargas made another note. Commander Reeves, you requested to be present at this hearing. Do you have testimony to offer? Reeves stood, his movements careful due to his injury. Ma'am, I am the officer in charge of the SEAL team that was pinned down during the engagement in question. I can state categorically that without Staff Sergeant Chin's intervention, my team would have been killed. Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer fired 4 shots before Staff Sergeant Chin engaged. All 4 missed their targets. His position did not account for the wind conditions in the valley. Staff Sergeant Chin's position and calculations were superior. Her shots were not lucky. They were the result of exceptional skill and proper tactical judgment. Kramer's face reddened. Commander, with respect, you are under extreme duress. You may not have been in a position to accurately assess the tactical situation. Reeves turned to face him, his voice turning cold. Master Guns, I've been in combat for 17 years. I know the difference between lucky shots and professional marksmanship. Staff Sergeant Chun eliminated 3 RPG positions and a Taliban commander with 4 consecutive shots at a range that most snipers would not even attempt. She did it in conditions that you, despite your experience, could not manage. That is not luck. That is mastery. The room fell silent. Chun could see Colonel Bradshaw shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Kramer looked like he wanted to argue further, but seemed to realize that contradicting a SEAL commander about combat operations would not help his case. Vargas looked down at her notes. I would like to examine the rifle in question. The custom modifications have been mentioned several times. I want to understand whether these modifications contributed to the successful engagement or represented unauthorized alterations to military equipment. Chun felt a flash of alarm. Her rifle was evidence, but it was also deeply personal. The thought of investigators examining it, questioning every choice she had made, felt invasive. Martinez spoke up from the back of the room. Ma'am, If I may, Staff Sergeant Chin's rifle modifications are all within regulations. Custom modifications are permitted for designated marksmen and snipers as long as they do not compromise the weapon's reliability or safety. Chin's rifle has passed every inspection for the past 6 years. Vargas nodded. Nevertheless, I want the Armory to conduct a full examination and provide a report on the modifications and their impact on weapon performance. The hearing continued for another hour, with testimony from Chief Dawson and 2 other SEAL team members who confirmed Chin's account. But Chen could feel the weight of institutional inertia working against her. Reeves and the SEALs believed in her, but they were outsiders to Marine Corps politics. Kramer had 28 years of relationships and favors and political capital. And Major Vargas, for all her fairness, was bound by regulations that did not account for situations where following orders meant letting people die. When the hearing finally concluded, Vargas announced that she would render her decision within 72 hours. Chen was dismissed, but remained confined to base pending the outcome. She walked back to her quarters feeling hollowed out. She had done everything right tactically and everything wrong politically. And in the military, politics often mattered more than performance. The Armory report arrived before Major Vargas's decision. Martinez brought it to Chen personally, his expression unreadable. "You need to see this," he said, handing her the folder. Chen opened it and began reading. The chief armorer, a gunnery sergeant named Robert Pike, had conducted an exhaustive examination of her rifle. What she found in his report made her breath catch. Every modification Chen had made was documented in meticulous detail. The custom stock that allowed for micro-adjustments in length of pull and cheek weld height. The trigger assembly that broke at precisely 1.8 pounds with 0 creep. The free-floating barrel that improved accuracy by eliminating pressure points. The custom scope turrets marked in half-minute increments for finer adjustments. But what Pike had discovered went beyond simple documentation. He had test-fired the rifle at the base's 1,000-meter range and compared its performance to a standard-issue M40A5. Chin's rifle had produced groups that were 43% tighter at extended range. The modifications were not just personal preference. They were measurable improvements in precision and consistency. More significantly, Pike had examined the ballistic computer Chen had integrated into her scope system. It was a piece of commercial equipment, not military issue, but it was also far more sophisticated than standard military rangefinders. It calculated windage, elevation, temperature, barometric pressure, and even the Coriolis effect for extreme long-range shots. Pike's conclusion was damning to Kramer's case and vindicating to Chen. Staff Sergeant Chin's modifications represent a level of technical expertise and practical application that exceeds standard military sniper training. The rifle as configured is optimized for extreme long-range precision shooting in variable conditions. The ballistic computer integration suggests extensive study of advanced marksmanship principles. This weapon system is not the result of amateur tinkering, but rather professional-level customization based on combat experience and technical knowledge. Chen looked up at Martinez. "This is good for me, right?" Martinez's expression was complicated. "It is good and bad. Good because it proves you knew exactly what you were doing and that your rifle is a superior weapon system. Bad because it makes Kramer look even worse by comparison. And men like Kramer do not take humiliation well." Before Chen could respond, her radio crackled with an emergency broadcast. "All personnel, this is TOC. We have a situation developing. SEAL Team 6 has been deployed on a time-sensitive target operation. Intelligence indicates high-value Taliban leadership meeting at a compound 12 kilometers south-southwest of this position." Chen and Martinez exchanged glances. Another SEAL operation. And given the timing, Chen knew exactly who would be providing sniper overwatch. Kramer would be desperate to prove himself after the embarrassment of the last mission. Martinez seemed to read her thoughts. "Stay here, Chen. You are still under investigation. You cannot get involved." But Chen was already moving toward the TOC. She could not explain the feeling in her gut, the same instinct that had warned her before the last mission went wrong. Something about this felt off. The TOC was buzzing with activity when she arrived. The large display screen showed a satellite image of the target compound, a walled structure in a valley system that looked eerily similar to where the last engagement had occurred. Colonel Bradshaw was coordinating with the SEAL team commander via radio link. And Kramer was there, geared up and ready to deploy to his Overwatch position. Bradshaw noticed Chen immediately. "Staff Sergeant, you should not be here. You are confined to quarters pending the investigation decision." "Sir," Chen said, keeping her voice level, "I need to see the mission brief. That valley system has wind patterns that are extremely difficult to read. If Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer is using the eastern approach again, he's going to have the same problems as last time." Kramer turned to face her, his expression thunderous. "The eastern approach is the tactically sound position, Staff Sergeant. Just because you got lucky with some cowboy shooting from exposed position does not mean you understand proper sniper tactics." "It is not about luck," Chen said, her patience finally fraying. "It is about physics and wind dynamics. That valley creates thermal updrafts and crosswinds that shift every 30 to 40 seconds. The eastern ridge puts you downwind during the strongest gusts. You need to be on the western approach to have any chance of reading the wind correctly." Colonel Bradshaw held up a hand. "Enough. Master Guns, proceed to your position. Staff Sergeant Chen, return to quarters immediately." "That is an order." Chen opened her mouth to argue, then saw the look on Bradshaw's face. He was not going to listen. She saluted and left, but she did not go back to quarters. Instead, she went to the armory. Pike was there, cleaning weapons. He looked up as Chen entered. "Staff Sergeant, I heard about the investigation. That report I filed was completely factual. Your rifle is exceptional. I need it back," Chen said bluntly. Pike shook his head. "You know I cannot do that. It is evidence. Major Vargas has not made her decision yet." Chen leaned against the counter. "Pike, how long have you been an armorer?" 15 years, Pike replied, confused by the question. "In those 15 years, have you ever seen a rifle like mine? Have you ever seen that level of precision from a modified weapon system?" Pike considered for a moment. "No," he admitted. "That is why I documented it so thoroughly. It is remarkable work. Then you understand that rifle is not just evidence. It is a tool that saves lives. And right now, there are SEALs heading into a valley where they might need exactly the kind of precision that rifle provides." Pike's expression tightened. "Chun, if I release that rifle to you and anything goes wrong, my career is over. We are both looking at court-martial." Chen met his eyes. "And if I do not have that rifle and those SEALs die because Kramer cannot make the shots they need, how will you feel then?" The two of them stood there in silence for a long moment. Then Pike turned and walked to the evidence locker. He opened it and pulled out Chen's rifle case. "This conversation never happened," he said quietly. "And if anyone asks, you broke into the armory and took it yourself." Chen took the case. "Thank you, Gunny." She moved quickly toward the western ridge, her heart pounding. She was about to commit career suicide, but she could not stand by and let men die because of Kramer's ego and Bradshaw's loyalty to an old friend. The rifle felt right in her hands as she set up position, familiar and perfectly balanced. Through her scope, she could see the target compound. The SEAL team was approximately 90 seconds from insertion. She ranged the distance, 2,614 meters, longer than the last engagement. The wind was already gusting hard, the dust devils dancing across the valley in chaotic patterns. Her radio crackled with the SEAL team's communications. They were entering the compound now. Clear on the entry point. Moving to objective. Then everything went wrong. "Ambush," the SEAL commander shouted over the radio. "We have got fighters in every building. This is not a leadership meeting, it is a trap. We're taking heavy fire from multiple positions. Request immediate support." Chen heard Kramer's voice on the command frequency. "I am engaging hostile positions now." She watched through her scope as Kramer fired from the eastern ridge. The shot went wide, the wind catching the bullet and pushing it off course. He fired again. Another miss. "TOC, this is Kramer. Wind conditions are worse than anticipated. I am unable to provide effective support from current position. Chun could hear the frustration in his voice, the humiliation of failing again. But there was no time for ego or politics. The SEAL team was trapped in a kill zone, and they needed help now. She settled into her position, her breathing slowing, her mind calculating a dozen variables simultaneously. The wind was gusting between 48 and 57 kilometers per hour. The temperature was dropping as the sun set, changing the air density. The target compound was at a different elevation than the last engagement, requiring new calculations. But Chun had spent 11 years preparing for moments like this. Her rifle was zeroed perfectly. Her ballistic computer was feeding her real-time data. And she had the high ground with the right angle on the wind. She identified the first target, a machine gun position on the compound's northern wall that was raking the SEAL team's position. The gunner was partially concealed behind sandbags, only his head and shoulders visible. At 2,600 meters in these wind conditions, it was a shot that most snipers would call impossible. Chun pressed the trigger. 2.3 seconds later, the machine gunner dropped. She was already acquiring the second target, a rifleman firing from a second-story window. Second shot. He fell back into the darkness of the building. TOC, this is Commander Reeves. Unknown Friendly is providing support. Extremely accurate fire. Who is on Overwatch? There was silence on the command frequency. Then Martinez's voice, carefully neutral. Continue your mission, Commander. Support will continue as needed. Chun eliminated 6 more targets in rapid succession. Each shot a masterclass in extreme long-range precision. The Taliban fighters began to panic, unable to locate the source of the devastating fire that was picking them off one by one. The SEAL team used the chaos to fight their way out of the compound, dragging 2 wounded men with them. When they were clear and moving toward the extraction point, Chun finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were steady, her heartbeat normal. She had done it again. Shots that should have been impossible, made possible through skill and preparation and the rifle that Kramer had mocked as a Barbie gun. But as she began breaking down her position, she saw vehicles approaching the western ridge. Military police. Colonel Bradshaw had figured out what she had done. And this time, there would be no lenient investigation. This time, she had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. The military police escorted Chun to the brig without ceremony. She did not resist. There was no point. She had knowingly violated direct orders, stolen evidence from the armory, and engaged in combat operations while under investigation. The fact that she had saved another SEAL team would not matter to the military justice system. She had crossed every line that existed. The holding cell was a concrete room with a metal bunk and a toilet. Chun sat on the bunk and waited. She felt strangely calm. For the first time in 16 months, since Hannah Torres had died, she felt like she had done exactly what she was supposed to do. She had used her skills to save lives. If that meant the end of her career, so be it. Martinez came to see her 2 hours later. The guard let him into the cell area, but stayed within earshot. Martinez looked tired and worried. They are talking about a court-martial, Chun, multiple charges, theft of military property, willful disobedience, unauthorized engagement. Colonel Bradshaw is furious. How is the SEAL team? Chun asked. Martinez's expression softened slightly. All alive, 2 wounded but stable. Commander Reeves is insisting on testifying on your behalf again. He says you saved his team for the 2nd time in a week. Chief Dawson is collecting statements from every team member about your actions. That is good of them, Chun said quietly. But it will not matter, will it? I broke the rules. The fact that I was right does not change that. Martinez sat down on the bunk beside her. Can I ask you something? Why did you do it? You knew what would happen. You knew your career was over the moment you took that rifle. Why not just let Kramer fail again? Chun looked at her hands. Because I could not watch more people die, she said simply. After Torres, after carrying that guilt for 16 months, I could not just stand by and do nothing when I had the ability to help. The Marine Corps can take my rank, my rifle, my career, but they cannot take away the fact that 12 men are alive right now because I made those shots. Martinez was quiet for a moment. You know that Kramer is pushing for the maximum punishment. He wants you dishonorably discharged and potentially imprisoned. He is saying you're a danger to good order and discipline. Of course he is, Chen said, because every time I succeed, it proves that everything he believes about women in combat is wrong. He cannot accept that, so he has to destroy me. There is something else, Martinez said carefully. Pike, the armorer, he came forward and admitted he gave you the rifle. He is facing charges too. Chen's head snapped up. What? No, he did not give me anything. I broke into the armory and took it. Martinez shook his head. Pike said he made the decision to release the rifle to you because he believed it was the right thing to do. He is falling on his sword for you, Chen. I cannot let him do that, Chen said, standing up. His career should not be destroyed because of my choices. It is already done. Pike gave a statement to Major Vargas this morning. He said that after examining your rifle and understanding its capabilities, he believed it was wrong to keep it locked up when lives were at stake. He is facing an Article 15 at minimum. Chen felt sick. This was spinning out of control. Now, a good Marine with 15 years of service was facing punishment because he had tried to help her do the right thing. The door to the cell area opened again, and Major Vargas entered. She looked at Martinez. Captain, I need to speak with Staff Sergeant Chen privately. Martinez stood, squeezed Chen's shoulder briefly, then left. Vargas waited until the door closed before speaking. She did not sit, just stood with her hands clasped behind her back. Staff Sergeant Chen, I completed my investigation into your first unauthorized engagement 3 days ago. I was preparing to deliver my decision when you decided to commit multiple additional violations of the Uniform Code of Military Justice. You have made my job significantly more complicated. Ma'am, Chen began, but Vargas held up a hand. Before you were arrested, I spent considerable time reviewing the evidence. The armory report on your rifle, the testimony from Commander Reeves and his team, the ballistic analysis of your shots, the wind condition reports from the meteorology office. I also reviewed Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer's service record in detail. Chen stayed silent, sensing that Vargas had more to say. What I found was illuminating. Kramer has an impressive record of combat engagements, but the vast majority occurred more than 10 years ago. His most recent confirmed kill was in 2016. Since then, he has primarily served in training and evaluation roles. His actual trigger time has been minimal. Meanwhile, your record shows consistent combat deployments and regular qualification at advanced levels. Your scores on the advanced sniper course were in the 98th percentile. Chen did not know where this was going. Is there a point to this, ma'am? Vargas allowed herself a slight smile. The point, Staff Sergeant, is that the evidence suggests you are objectively a better sniper than Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer. Your rifle modifications demonstrate technical expertise that exceeds standard military training. Your shots under extreme conditions demonstrate a level of skill that is rare even among special operations snipers. And yet, you have been systematically prevented from utilizing those skills because of politics and prejudice. Ma'am, Chen said carefully, I still violated direct orders. Twice. Vargas nodded. You did. And normally that would result in a court-martial and likely a dishonorable discharge. However, there are complicating factors. First, both violations occurred in combat situations where American lives were at immediate risk. Second, both violations resulted in successful outcomes with 0 friendly casualties. Third, the officer who gave you the orders you violated appears to have been motivated by personal animosity rather than tactical judgment. Chen felt a flicker of hope, but tried to suppress it. What are you saying, ma'am? I am saying that the military justice system exists to maintain good order and discipline, but also must account for extraordinary circumstances. Your actions were technically illegal, but morally justified. You saved lives at the cost of your career. That is not the behavior of a criminal. That is the behavior of a hero who was failed by her chain of command. So what happens now? Chen asked. Vargas pulled out a folder. I have made my recommendation to the convening authority. I am recommending that all charges be dropped on the condition that you accept a transfer to a new unit and submit to mandatory counseling regarding adherence to orders. I am also recommending that Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer be formally investigated for potential bias in his treatment of female Marines under his command. Chun stared at her. You're dropping the charges? I am recommending they be dropped. The final decision rests with General Patricia Morrison. She is the commanding officer for this region and has the authority to accept or reject my recommendation. She is also, Vargas added with a meaningful look, the highest-ranking female Marine in Afghanistan. The general arrived at Firebase Hendricks the next day. Chun was brought from the brig to Colonel Bradshaw's office, where Morrison was waiting. The general was a woman in her mid-50s with iron-gray hair and a presence that filled the room. Kramer was also present, standing at rigid attention, his face carefully neutral. Bradshaw looked uncomfortable, caught between his loyalty to Kramer and the presence of a superior officer who clearly had opinions about the situation. General Morrison sat behind Bradshaw's desk as if she owned it, reviewing documents with a critical eye. Staff Sergeant Chun, Morrison said without preamble, I have read Major Vargas's report. I have also read Commander Reeves's commendation of your actions. And I have reviewed Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer's service record and his performance reports on female Marines under his instruction. The pattern that emerges is troubling. She looked up at Kramer. Master Guns, you have served this corps with distinction for nearly 3 decades. But the evidence suggests that your views on women in combat roles have clouded your judgment and potentially endangered lives. Staff Sergeant Chun made shots that you could not make, not because she was lucky, but because she was better prepared and better equipped. Your response was to attempt to destroy her career rather than acknowledge her competence. Ma'am, Kramer began, his voice tight, I was acting in accordance with regulations and proper procedure. Morrison's eyes hardened. You were acting in accordance with your own prejudices, and it nearly cost us 2 SEAL teams. That is unacceptable. She turned to Chun. Staff Sergeant, you violated orders and protocols. Under normal circumstances, that would end your career. However, these are not normal circumstances. You were placed in an impossible position by a chain of command that valued politics over effectiveness. Your actions saved American lives at great personal cost. That demonstrates the kind of courage and integrity that this corps needs. Morrison stood. I am accepting Major Vargas's recommendation. All charges against you are dropped. You will be transferred to the Special Operations Training Group as a senior sniper instructor. Your rifle modifications will be studied for potential adoption across the sniper community, and you will receive a formal commendation for your actions in both engagements. She turned to Kramer. Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer, you are hereby relieved of all training and evaluation duties pending a formal investigation into your treatment of female Marines. You will be reassigned to administrative duties until that investigation concludes. Kramer's face went white. Ma'am, this is based on unsubstantiated allegations and the word of junior personnel. Morrison's voice turned to ice. It is based on a pattern of behavior documented over 8 years, Master Guns. 8 female Marines rejected from sniper training despite meeting standards. 2 formal complaints that were mysteriously dismissed. And 2 combat engagements where your inability to adapt to conditions nearly resulted in American deaths. That is not allegation. That is evidence. She dismissed Kramer with a gesture, and he left the room with his shoulders rigid and his face burning with humiliation. Chun stood there, barely able to process what had just happened. Her career was not over. She was not going to prison. She had won. The investigation into Kramer's conduct moved with surprising speed. General Morrison had assigned a team of 3 officers to review his entire career, focusing specifically on his interactions with female Marines. What they uncovered went deeper than Chun had imagined. Martinez briefed her in the mess hall 3 days after the general's decision. They found emails, he said quietly, stirring his coffee without drinking it. Kramer had been communicating with other senior NCOs, coordinating efforts to wash out female candidates from advanced training programs. They called it maintaining standards, but the emails make it clear it was about keeping women out regardless of their qualifications. Chun felt a mixture of vindication and disgust. How many women? At least 23 over the past 8 years. Some washed out legitimately, but others were failed on subjective evaluations despite meeting or exceeding objective standards. The investigation team is tracking down as many as they can to get statements. What about his daughter? Chen asked. Emily, is that part of the investigation? Martinez nodded. They interviewed her. She confirmed that she blamed the Marine Corps for a failure at boot camp and that her father shared her anger. She said he told her that the Corps was being destroyed by political correctness and that women were lowering combat effectiveness. She actually seemed proud of what he had been doing. Chen shook her head. That kind of thinking is poison. How many good Marines did we lose because of him? How many women who could have served with distinction were driven out? The investigation will determine that. But Chen, there's something else. The team found evidence that Kramer manipulated your deployment orders. He specifically requested that you be sent to Hendricks and assigned to non-combat duties. He wanted you sidelined, where you could not build a reputation or gain combat experience. So everything Martinez had suspected was true. Kramer had not just been hostile toward her. He had actively worked to sabotage her career, and he had done it to dozens of other women as well. General Morrison wants to see you, Martinez said. She is flying back to Kabul tomorrow, but she asked if you could meet with her this afternoon. Chun found the general in the small office that had been set aside for her use during her visit to Firebase Hendricks. Morrison was reviewing documents, her reading glasses perched on her nose. She looked up as Chun entered and saluted. At ease, Staff Sergeant. Sit down. Chun sat, feeling uncharacteristically nervous. Morrison had saved her career, but Chun still did not fully understand why. I want to talk to you about your future, Morrison said, removing her glasses. The transfer to Special Operations Training Group is happening, but I want to discuss what that means. You're going to be the first female senior instructor in the Marine Scout Sniper program. That comes with challenges beyond the technical aspects of the job. Ma'am, I understand that there will be resistance, Chun said carefully. Resistance is putting it mildly. Morrison leaned back in her chair. You're going to face hostility from instructors who think like Kramer. You're going to have students who do not want to learn from a woman. You're going to be scrutinized in ways that male instructors never are. Every decision you make will be questioned. Every mistake will be magnified. Then why offer me the position? Chen asked. Because you have already proven you can handle it. Morrison's expression hardened. I have spent 32 years in this Corps, Staff Sergeant. I have fought for every promotion, every command, every opportunity. I have had to be twice as good as my male peers to be considered half as competent. And I am tired of watching talented women be driven out by men who are threatened by their abilities. Chen met her eyes. Is that why you intervened? Because of what happened to you? Morrison nodded slowly. When I was a captain, I had a commanding officer who tried to destroy my career because I filed a harassment complaint against one of his friends. He buried my fitness reports, blocked my promotion, and made my life hell for 2 years. I nearly quit. The only reason I did not was because a female colonel intervened and transferred me to her command. She saved my career the way I'm trying to save yours. Chun felt a surge of gratitude and determination. I will not let you down, ma'am. I know you will not. Morrison pulled out another folder. This is the preliminary report on your rifle modifications. The Weapons Development Division wants to send a team to examine it in detail. They are interested in potentially adapting some of your innovations for wider use. Chun felt a flush of pride. Her Barbie gun was being taken seriously at the highest levels of Marine Corps weapons development. There is one more thing, Morrison said, her tone becoming more serious. Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer is not going quietly. He has filed a counter-complaint alleging that the investigation against him is politically motivated and that I am showing favoritism toward you because of gender. He is claiming that your shots were lucky and that the whole situation is being twisted to push a social agenda. Chen's jaw tightened. Can he do that? He already has. And he has supporters. Senior officers who agree with his views, who think that women in combat roles are a mistake. They are rallying around him, claiming he is being railroaded. This is going to get uglier before it gets better. What do you need from me, ma'am? Morrison looked at her with something like approval. I need you to be perfect, Staff Sergeant. I need you to go to Special Operations Training Group and be the best instructor they have ever seen. I need you to train snipers who go on to save lives in combat. I need you to prove beyond any possible doubt that you deserve to be there. Because Kramer and his allies are going to be watching, waiting for you to fail so they can say they were right all along. Chen nodded. I can do that. I know you can. But I also need you to understand the stakes. This is not just about your career anymore. You have become a symbol, whether you wanted to or not. There are women throughout the Marine Corps watching what happens to you. If you succeed, it opens doors for them. If you fail, it gives ammunition to people like Kramer. That is a lot of pressure, ma'am, Chen said quietly. Morrison smiled grimly. Welcome to being a trailblazer, Staff Sergeant. It is not fair, it is not easy, but it is necessary. Someone has to be first. Someone has to kick down the doors. And right now, that someone is you. Chen left the meeting feeling the weight of Morrison's words. She had thought this was about proving herself, about showing that she was good enough. But it was bigger than that. Every female Marine who came after her would have an easier or harder path, depending on what Chen did next. She found Commander Reeves at the medical facility, getting his final checkup before his team deployed back to their home base. His shoulder was healing well, though he would need physical therapy for months. Staff Sergeant Chen, Reeves said when he saw her. I heard about the General's decision. Congratulations. Though it should never have been in question. Thank you, sir. And thank you for your testimony. It made a difference. Reeves shook his head. I just told the truth. You saved my team. Twice. That is not something I'm going to forget. He paused, then continued. I also put in a formal request with my command. If you're going to be training snipers at SODEG, I want some of your graduates attached to SEAL teams. I have worked with a lot of snipers over the years, and I have never seen anyone with your level of skill. I want that kind of capability supporting my operations. Chen felt a surge of professional pride. I would be honored, sir. Just keep doing what you are doing. Keep being excellent. And do not let bastards like Kramer make you doubt yourself. You belong here, Chen. Never forget that. After Reeves left, Chen walked to the firebase perimeter and looked out over the Afghan valley where she had made those impossible shots. The sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of orange and purple. In 2 days, she would leave this place and begin her new assignment. A new chapter in a career that had almost ended. But she knew the fight was not over. Kramer was not going to accept defeat gracefully. He had too much invested in his worldview, too much ego wrapped up in being right about women in combat. And he had allies who shared his beliefs. The investigation might end his career, but it would not end the attitudes that had allowed him to operate unchallenged for so long. Chen thought about Hannah Torres, about the young Marine who had died before she could prove what she was capable of. She thought about the 23 women who had been driven out of training programs by Kramer's manipulation. She thought about all the women who would come after her, who would face their own Kramers, their own battles against prejudice disguised as standards. And she made a promise to herself. She would be the instructor she wished she had when she was starting out. She would create a program where talent mattered more than gender, where female Marines got the same opportunities and the same respect as their male counterparts. She would make sure that no one else had to fight as hard as she had just to be given a chance. The military police had returned her rifle that morning, along with a formal apology for its confiscation. It sat in its case in her quarters, cleaned and ready. Tomorrow she would take it to the range and fire a few rounds, re-establishing the connection between shooter and weapon. But tonight, she just stood and watched the sunset, feeling the weight of what was coming and the determination to meet it heat-in. Somewhere in this firebase, Kramer was planning his next move. But Chen was ready for him, because she had learned something important over the past 2 weeks. She did not need permission to be excellent. She did not need approval to do the right thing. All she needed was the courage to keep moving forward, even when the whole system seemed designed to hold her back. And courage was something Maya Chen had in abundance. The formal hearing into Kramer's conduct took place at Camp Lejeune 3 weeks later. Chen had been transferred back to the States and was settling into her new role at Special Operations Training Group when she received the summons to testify. The hearing was being conducted by a board of 3 colonels, with General Morrison observing. Kramer had hired a civilian attorney, a former Marine JAG officer who specialized in defending service members against disciplinary actions. The hearing room was packed. Word had spread through the Marine Corps about the case, and it had become something larger than just one man's misconduct. It had become a referendum on women in combat roles, on whether the old guard's resistance to change was justified or simply prejudice. Chin sat in the witness waiting area with Martinez and Commander Reeves. Both had been called to testify about the combat engagements. Also waiting were 5 of the 23 women who had been identified as victims of Kramer's sabotage. Chin had met with them the night before, hearing their stories. Each one was heartbreaking. Talented Marines who had been told they were not good enough, who had internalized that failure, who had left the Corps believing they had let themselves down, when in reality they had been systematically excluded. The board called Chun first. She walked into the hearing room in her dress blues, her ribbons and medals displayed. Kramer sat at the defense table with his attorney, his face a mask of controlled anger. He would not look at her. The senior member of the board, Colonel James Richardson, began the questioning. Staff Sergeant Chun, please describe your professional relationship with Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer prior to your deployment to Afghanistan. Chun spoke clearly and without emotion. She described 3 years of working under Kramer's authority at the Scout Sniper School, his consistent undermining of female instructors, his public mockery of her rifle modifications, his attempts to prevent her from mentoring struggling female students like Private Walsh. She presented it as facts, not complaints, letting the evidence speak for itself. Kramer's attorney objected multiple times, claiming hearsay and lack of evidence. But Chin had kept records. She had documented every interaction, every dismissive comment, every time Kramer had blocked her from opportunities. She produced emails, training reports, and witness statements from other instructors who had observed Kramer's behavior. The attorney tried to shake her credibility. Is it not true, Staff Sergeant, that you have a personal vendetta against my client? That you resented his authority and his attempt to maintain standards? Chin met his eyes. I have no vendetta, sir. I have documentation of systematic discrimination. There is a difference between maintaining standards and excluding qualified personnel based on gender. The attorney pressed harder. Your rifle modifications, this so-called Barbie gun that you're so proud of, is it not true that it violates the spirit of military standardization? That it represents an individualistic approach that undermines unit cohesion? Chun felt a flash of anger, but kept her voice steady. My rifle modifications improve accuracy by 43% at extended range, as documented by Gunnery Sergeant Pike's examination. Those modifications have been studied by the Weapons Development Division and are being considered for adoption across the sniper community. The rifle saves lives. That is not individualism. That is innovation. But when Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer called it a Barbie gun, he was expressing legitimate concern about non-standard equipment. Was he not? He was expressing contempt based on gender, Chin replied. He never questioned male snipers who made similar modifications to their weapons. He only questioned mine because I am a woman. The attorney tried several more angles of attack, but Chun had prepared for this. She had spent 3 weeks going over her testimony with Morrison's team, anticipating every possible challenge. She did not waver. When the board moved on to the combat engagements, Chun described both missions in technical detail. She explained the ballistic calculations, the wind conditions, the tactical situation. She made it clear that her decisions to engage had been based on professional judgment, not emotion or ego. And when Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer was unable to neutralize the targets, the attorney asked, "Did you feel satisfaction? Did you enjoy proving him wrong?" Chin shook her head. I felt relief that American service members were not going to die. There was no satisfaction in it, only the knowledge that I had done my job. The board called Kramer next. He took the stand with military bearing, his uniform immaculate, his ribbons impressive. He began by recounting his 28 years of service, his combat deployments, his contributions to sniper training. He presented himself as a dedicated Marine who had only ever wanted to maintain the high standards that made the Corps elite. Staff Sergeant Chun is a competent shooter, Kramer testified. I never denied that. But competence at the range does not translate to combat effectiveness. Women lack the physical strength and emotional stability required for sustained combat operations. This is not prejudice. This is biology. The board members exchanged glances. Colonel Richardson leaned forward. Master Gunnery Sergeant, are you saying that Staff Sergeant Chin's 2 successful combat engagements, which saved 12 American lives, do not demonstrate combat effectiveness? Kramer shifted in his seat. She got lucky, sir. Any sniper with enough attempts will eventually hit their target. The fact that she succeeded twice does not prove that women belong in sniper roles. Richardson's expression hardened. So 4 consecutive shots at over 2,000 meters in variable wind conditions, eliminating 3 RPG positions and a Taliban commander. That was luck? With respect, sir, yes. I have 43 confirmed kills over 3 deployments. I know the difference between skill and fortune. Then the board called Commander Reeves. The SEAL officer walked in with confidence, his shoulders still showing slight stiffness from his injury. He did not mince words. Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer fired 4 shots during our first engagement and missed all 4. Staff Sergeant Chun fired 4 shots and hit all 4. During the second engagement, Kramer again failed to provide effective support. Chun eliminated 8 targets in rapid succession. That is not luck, gentlemen. That is superior skill. Kramer's attorney stood. Commander, is it possible that Staff Sergeant Chun simply had a better position? That the difference was tactical placement rather than individual capability? Reeves turned to look at him. Master Guns had his choice of positions and chose poorly. Staff Sergeant Chun chose correctly. That tactical judgment is part of being a superior sniper. She read the terrain better. She read the wind better. She executed better. In special operations, we evaluate people on results. Chin's results speak for themselves. The hearing continued for 2 more days. The 5 women who had been driven out of training programs testified about their experiences. Their stories were remarkably similar. Subjective evaluations that failed them despite meeting objective standards. Sudden changes in requirements that seemed designed to target female candidates specifically. A culture of hostility that made clear they were not welcome. One of them, a former corporal named Sarah Vega, broke down while testifying. She described how Kramer had told her she would never be a real Marine, that she was wasting everyone's time, that she should quit before she got someone killed. She had believed him. She had left the Corps and spent the next 4 years working dead-end jobs, convinced she was a failure. I was not a failure, Vegas said through tears. He failed me. He took away my dream because he could not stand the idea of a woman being as good as him. Kramer's attorney tried to discredit her, suggesting she was bitter about her own inadequacies. But when the board reviewed her training scores and physical fitness tests, they found she had been in the top 20% of her class in every measurable category. The only area where she had failed was in subjective evaluations conducted by Kramer and instructors loyal to him. The final witness was General Morrison herself. She took the stand and delivered testimony that was clinical and devastating. She presented evidence of Kramer's email communications, showing coordination with other NCOs to wash out female candidates. She presented statistical analysis showing that under Kramer's evaluation, female candidates failed at a rate 3 times higher than under other evaluators, despite having similar qualification scores. And she presented evidence that Kramer had lied in his fitness reports about female Marines, inflating their weaknesses and minimizing their strengths. It was systematic, it was deliberate, and it had damaged careers and lives. When Morrison finished, the board recessed to deliberate. Chun sat in the waiting area with the other women, all of them silent. They had done everything they could. Now it was up to the board to decide whether the evidence mattered more than politics and tradition. The board returned after 6 hours. Colonel Richardson read the decision. After reviewing all testimony and evidence, this board finds that Master Gunnery Sergeant Wade Kramer engaged in systematic discrimination against female Marines under his authority. He manipulated evaluations, created a hostile training environment, and violated the Marine Corps values of honor, courage, and commitment. This board recommends that Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer be reduced in rank to Staff Sergeant, forfeit 6 months' pay, and be separated from the Marine Corps with a general discharge under honorable conditions. Chun heard Kramer's sharp intake of breath. A general discharge meant he would lose his full retirement benefits. It meant his legacy would be tainted forever. It meant the Marine Corps he had served for 28 years had judged him and found him wanting. Furthermore, Richardson continued, this board recommends formal apologies and compensation to all Marines who were improperly evaluated or discharged due to Kramer's actions. The Marine Corps failed these women. We owe them better. Kramer stood abruptly, his face red with rage. This is political correctness destroying the Corps, he shouted. You're sacrificing standard for optics. You're weakening our combat effectiveness to appease social justice warriors. Colonel Richardson's voice turned to ice. Master Gunnery Sergeant, you are out of order. This board has made its decision based on evidence, not politics. Your conduct was unbecoming of a Marine, and you will accept the consequences. Bailiff, remove him. As the military police escorted Kramer from the room, he looked at Chun with pure hatred. This is not over, he said. You have destroyed everything I built. I will make sure everyone knows what you really are. Chun met his gaze without flinching. What I really am is a Marine who saved 12 lives with a rifle you called a toy. History will remember that, Master Guns, not your bitterness. The news of Kramer's reduction in rank and discharge spread through the Marine Corps like wildfire. Within 48 hours, Chen's story was being discussed in bases around the world. Some saw it as justice. Others saw it as the beginning of the end for traditional military standards. The divide was sharp and bitter. Chen reported to her new position at Special Operations Training Group the week after the hearing concluded. The facility at Camp Lejeune was state-of-the-art, with ranges that extended to 2,000 meters and training facilities that rivaled anything in the military. She walked into the instructor building carrying her rifle case, ready to begin the next chapter of her career. The commandant of the school, Colonel Marcus Webb, was waiting in his office. He was a veteran sniper himself, with 2 combat deployments and a reputation for being fair but demanding. He stood when Chun entered and offered his hand. Staff Sergeant Chun, welcome to SOTG. I have read your file and the after-action reports from Afghanistan. Impressive work. Thank you, sir, Chun said, shaking his hand. I'm going to be direct with you, Staff Sergeant. You are walking into a difficult situation. Half the instructors here think you are a hero who exposed a corrupt system. The other half think you destroyed the career of a decorated Marine to advance a political agenda. You're going to have to win them over through performance, not rhetoric. I understand, sir. I am here to train snipers, not debate policy. Webb nodded approvingly. Good, because we have a class starting next week. 24 students, including 3 women. This will be the first Scout Sniper course with multiple female candidates, and the entire Corps is watching. You will be the lead instructor for precision marksmanship. Everything you teach will be scrutinized. Every student who succeeds or fails will be attributed to your methods. Chun felt the weight of it but kept her expression calm. I'm ready, sir. I hope so. Webb pulled out a folder. The Weapons Development Division has completed their analysis of your rifle modifications. They want to implement several of your innovations across the sniper program. Custom stock adjustments, improved scope turrets, integrated ballistic computers. They're calling it the M40A6 Enhanced Precision System. Your Barbie gun is about to become standard issue. Chun felt a surge of vindication. Kramer had mocked her rifle as amateur tinkering. Now it was being adopted as the new standard. That felt like justice. There is something else, Webb continued. The Marine Corps has approved a new training protocol based on your recommendations. Female candidates will no longer be evaluated by single instructors. All evaluations will be conducted by panels to prevent individual bias. And all subjective assessments will be accompanied by objective performance metrics. We are calling it the Chun Protocol. Sir, I do not think naming it after me is appropriate, Chun said quickly. It will just create more resentment. Webb shook his head. It is already decided. The The commandant of the Marine Corps himself approved it. You exposed a systemic problem, and the Corps is fixing it. That deserves recognition. Chun spent her first week observing the current class and meeting the other instructors. The reception was mixed. Some greeted her warmly, congratulating her on her actions in Afghanistan. Others were coldly professional, their disapproval barely concealed. One instructor, a gunnery sergeant named Tom Hendricks, was openly hostile. "You know you destroyed a good man's career," Hendricks said to her in the instructor lounge. Kramer spent 28 years serving this corps. He had 43 confirmed kills, and you threw all that away because you could not handle some criticism. Chun kept her voice level. He sabotaged the careers of 23 female Marines. That is not criticism. That is discrimination. Hendricks scoffed. Those women were not good enough. That is why they failed. But now we have to pretend that everyone is equal, lower our standards to make the politicians happy, and hope we do not get people killed in the process. Chun met his eyes. "I will make you a deal, Gunny. Judge me on my performance as an instructor. If my students perform worse than yours, if they fail to meet standards, then you could say I was wrong. But if my students succeed, if they become effective combat snipers, then you acknowledge that the problem was never about standards. It was about prejudice." Hendricks stared at her for a long moment. "Fine, but when your students wash out, do not come crying about how unfair it all is." The new class began the following Monday. 24 students stood at attention on the parade ground as Colonel Webb introduced the instructor team. When he introduced Chun as the precision marksmanship lead, she saw several students exchange glances. The 3 female students looked at her with expressions that mixed hope and fear. After the formation was dismissed, one of the female students approached Chun. She was a lance corporal named Jessica Torres. Chun felt her heart skip when she heard the name. "Torres. Like Hannah." "Ma'am, I mean Staff Sergeant," the young Marine said nervously. "I just wanted to say that I would not be here if it were not for you. I was going to drop my application when I heard about the hostility toward women. But then I heard what you did, how you fought back, and I decided to try anyway." Chun felt emotion rise in her throat. "What is your first name?" "Lance Corporal Jessica." "Mom." "Jessica Torres." Chun took a breath. "I knew a Hannah Torres. She was a student of mine. She died in a training accident 16 months ago." Jessica nodded. "She was my cousin, ma'am. She wrote to me about you before she died. She said you were the best instructor she had ever had, that you made her believe she could do anything. After she died, I wanted to honor her memory by finishing what she started." Chun felt tears threatening, but held them back. "She would have been proud of you, Lance Corporal. And I promise you, I will train you to the highest standard. Not because you are a woman, but because you're a Marine who deserves the best training we can provide." Over the next 8 weeks, Chun poured everything she had into the course. She taught precision shooting with a level of detail and patience that surprised even herself. She broke down every aspect of marksmanship into component skills, then built them back up. She spent extra hours with struggling students regardless of gender, identifying weaknesses and creating customized training plans. The 3 female students faced constant scrutiny from some of the male students and the skeptical instructors. Chun watched for any sign of unfair treatment, documenting everything. When Hendricks tried to fail one of the women, Corporal Amanda Rivers, on a subjective evaluation despite her meeting all objective standards, Chun challenged it. The evaluation went to a review panel under the new Chun protocol. The panel examined Rivers' scores, her range performance, her physical fitness tests. They found she had met or exceeded standards in every measurable category. Hendricks' evaluation was overturned, and Rivers continued in the course. Hendricks confronted Chun afterward. "You are protecting her because she is a woman." Chun shook her head. "I am holding her to the same standard as everyone else. You're trying to fail her because she is a woman. There is a difference." The course culminated in a field training exercise that simulated combat conditions. Students had to make precision shots at extended range while under time pressure and physical stress. It was the ultimate test of everything they had learned. Jessica Torres was paired with a male student, a corporal named David Chun. no relation. They had to work together to eliminate simulated targets at ranges from 800 to 1,800 meters. Chen watched through binoculars as they moved into position, calculated their shots, and engaged. Jessica's first shot missed by 6 inches, the wind catching her off guard. Chen saw her frustration, saw her take a breath and recalculate. The second shot was dead center. Third shot hit. Fourth shot hit. She and her partner cleared all 12 targets in the allotted time. When the scores were tallied at the end of the exercise, Jessica Torres had the third highest score in the class. Corporal Rivers was 7th. The third female student, Private First Class Keiko Yamamoto, was 9th. All 3 had passed, all 3 had performed well, and all 3 had done it under intense scrutiny and pressure. The graduation ceremony took place on a Friday afternoon. 21 students had made it through the course, including all 3 women. Colonel Webb presented each graduate with their Scout Sniper Certificate and the prestigious Hog's Tooth badge that marked them as qualified snipers. When he called Jessica Torres's name, Chun felt her chest tighten. The young woman walked forward with pride, her back straight, her eyes clear. Webb pinned the badge to her uniform and shook her hand. Then Torres turned and saluted Chun directly, holding it for a long moment. After the ceremony, Commander Reeves approached Chun. His SEAL team had sent several candidates through the course, and 2 had graduated. He shook Chen's hand warmly. "I told you I wanted your graduates to support in my operations," he said. "I meant it. I have already put in a request for Torres and Rivers to be assigned to SEAL support platoons. They are exactly the kind of snipers we need." Chun felt pride swell in her chest. "Thank you, sir. That means everything." Reeves smiled. "No, Staff Sergeant. Thank you. You did not just save my team in Afghanistan. You changed the entire system. Those women who graduated today, they're going to save lives because you had the courage to fight for what was right." That evening, Chun returned to her quarters and found an envelope on her desk. It was from General Morrison. Inside was a single sheet of paper with a brief message. "Staff Sergeant Chun, the Marine Corps has approved your promotion to Gunnery Sergeant, effective immediately. You have earned it through exceptional service and moral courage. Additionally, the Commandant has asked me to inform you that your actions in Afghanistan have been recognized with the Bronze Star with Valor device. The formal ceremony will take place next month. You have made the Corps better. Keep pushing forward. Semper Fi. General P. Morrison." Chun sat down, holding the letter. Gunnery Sergeant. The same rank Kramer would be reduced to before his discharge, but where his rank would be stripped away in disgrace, hers was earned through service and courage. She thought about Hannah Torres, about the young woman who had died before she could prove herself. She thought about Jessica Torres, who would carry on her cousin's legacy. She thought about the 23 women whose careers Kramer had destroyed, and the countless more who would now have fair opportunities because the system had changed. The fight had been hard. The cost had been high. But standing here now, promoted and recognized, knowing that she had made a real difference, Chun felt something she had not felt in 16 months. Peace. The Bronze Star ceremony took place 6 weeks later at Marine Corps Base Quantico. Chun stood in her dress blues on a stage before hundreds of Marines, dignitaries, and media representatives. The Commandant of the Marine Corps himself, General Raymond Foster, pinned the medal to her chest while cameras flashed and a military band played. For extraordinary heroism in connection with military operations against an armed enemy, General Foster read from the citation. Staff Sergeant Maya Chun distinguished herself through exceptional courage and tactical skill during 2 separate combat engagements in Afghanistan. Her precision marksmanship under extreme conditions directly saved the lives of 12 American service members. Her actions reflect great credit upon herself and the United States Marine Corps. The audience applauded. Chun saw familiar faces in the crowd. Martinez was there, beaming with pride. Commander Reeves and his SEAL team sat in the front row in their dress uniforms. Jessica Torres, Amanda Rivers, and Keiko Yamamoto stood at attention with their new sniper platoons. And General Morrison sat in the VIP section, her expression one of satisfaction. After the ceremony, Chun was surrounded by reporters wanting statements. She kept her answers brief and professional, deflecting attention from herself and toward the Marines she had trained and served with. But one reporter, a woman from a major news network, asked the question that cut to the heart of everything. Gunnery Sergeant Chun, your story has become symbolic of the larger debate about women in combat roles. What would you say to young women who are considering military service but fear they will face the kind of discrimination you encountered? Chun took a moment to consider her answer. I would tell them that the fight is worth it. Yes, there are still people in the military who believe women do not belong in combat roles. Yes, you will face scrutiny and skepticism that your male peers will never experience. But the military is changing. The Chun Protocol exists now. There are protections in place that did not exist when I started. And most importantly, there are more of us every day. You will not be alone. The reporter pressed, do you have any message for Master Gunnery Sergeant Kramer, the man whose actions led to this situation? Chun shook her head. I have nothing to say to him. My focus is on the future, not the past. I am training the next generation of Marine snipers, and that is where my energy belongs. But privately, Chun knew that Kramer's shadow still lingered. She had heard through unofficial channels that he was bitter and angry, that he blamed her for destroying his legacy, that he was telling anyone who would listen that she had been promoted because of politics rather than merit. Some believed him. The divide in the Corps over her case had not healed. A month after the ceremony, Chun received an unexpected visitor at SOTG. It was Sarah Vega, the former corporal who had testified at Kramer's hearing about being driven out of sniper training. She looked different than she had in the courtroom, more confident, more alive. Gunnery Sergeant Chun, Vega said, standing at attention. I wanted to speak with you if you have a moment. Chun invited her into her office. What can I do for you, Sarah? Vega took a breath. After the hearing, after everything that came out about what Kramer did, the Marine Corps offered me the opportunity to re-enlist and go through scout sniper training again. They said they would consider my previous training time and that I would have a fair evaluation under the new protocols. Chun felt excitement rise. That is incredible. Are you going to accept? Vega nodded. I already did. I report for training in 2 weeks, and I requested specifically that you be one of my instructors. I need to prove to myself that I was not a failure, that I really could have made it if the system had been fair. Chun stood and extended her hand. You were never a failure, Sarah. The system failed you, and I promise you, under my instruction, you will get every opportunity to succeed. The only thing that will determine your graduation is your performance, nothing else. Vega shook her hand, tears in her eyes. Thank you. You do not know what this means to me. Over the following months, Chun's reputation continued to grow. Her training methods were being studied and adopted by other sniper schools. The modifications she had made to her rifle were now standard issue, and the new M40A6 Enhanced Precision System was proving superior in field testing. And the Chun Protocol was expanding beyond just sniper training to other combat specialties, creating fairness and transparency throughout the evaluation process. But the most meaningful moment came on a Tuesday afternoon when Chun was conducting range training with a new class. A staff car pulled up to the range, and General Morrison stepped out. Chun called the class to attention, and Morrison returned their salute before asking to speak with Chun privately. They walked to a quiet area overlooking the range. Morrison watched the students training for a moment before speaking. I wanted to tell you in person. The investigation into Kramer's network uncovered something significant. He was not working alone. There were 17 other senior NCOs and officers who were coordinating to exclude women from combat specialties across multiple bases. The Marine Corps is taking action against all of them. Chun absorbed this. 17 more. The scope of it was staggering. Morrison continued. Your courage in standing up to Kramer did not just expose one bad actor. It exposed an entire system of discrimination that had been operating in the shadows for years. Because you refused to accept injustice, because you documented everything and fought back, you dismantled a conspiracy that had damaged hundreds of careers. Ma'am, Chun said quietly, I was just trying to do my job and save lives. I never intended to start a revolution. Morrison smiled. The best revolutions are started by people who are just trying to do the right thing. You did not set out to change the Marine Corps, Chun, but you did it anyway. And that makes it even more impressive. She handed Chun a folder. This is a roster of every female Marine who was improperly evaluated or dismissed over the past decade because of Kramer and his network. The Corps is reaching out to all of them, offering re-enlistment opportunities, apologies, and, in some cases, compensation. That is 147 women who are getting a second chance because of what you did. Chun opened the folder and saw page after page of names. Each one represented a dream that had been stolen, a career that had been sabotaged, a woman who had been told she was not good enough when the truth was that the system was rigged against her. Additionally, Morrison said, the Secretary of the Navy has approved the creation of a new position, Director of Combat Specialty Integration. The role is to ensure fair evaluation and treatment of all Marines regardless of gender in combat training programs. The Secretary wants you for the position. It would mean a promotion to Master Sergeant and assignment to Headquarters Marine Corps. Chun looked up in surprise. Mom, I am an instructor. I train snipers. That is what I am good at. Morrison nodded. And you will still do that. The position would be part-time oversight, part-time instruction. You would split your time between policy work at headquarters and actual training at SOTEG. The Marine Corps needs your perspective at the strategic level, Chun. We need someone who has lived this experience and understands what needs to change. Chun thought about Hannah Torres, about Jessica Torres carrying on her cousin's legacy, about Sarah Vega getting her second chance, about 147 women who would now have fair opportunities. The scope of what could be accomplished in a position like that was enormous. I accept, ma'am. Morrison extended her hand. Welcome to the fight at the strategic level, Master Sergeant Chun. It is going to be challenging, frustrating, and exhausting, but it is also going to change lives. That evening, Chun returned to her quarters and found a letter waiting for her. It had no return address, but she recognized the handwriting on the envelope. It was from Kramer. Her first instinct was to throw it away unopened, but curiosity won out. She opened it and read, Staff Sergeant Chun, I am writing this from my brother's house in Ohio, where I am living since my discharge. I want you to know that I do not regret what I did. I believe I was right to maintain standards and protect the warrior culture of the Marine Corps from political correctness. But I have had time to think, and I realized something. You were a better sniper than me. Your rifle was superior to mine. Your students will likely be better trained than mine were. And that knowledge eats at me every day. I spent 28 years believing that men were inherently superior in combat, and you proved me wrong with 4 shots in an Afghan valley. I cannot forgive you for that, but I can acknowledge the truth. You won, Chun. You beat me in my own game. I hope you're satisfied. Wade Kramer. Chun read the letter twice, then folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer. It was not an apology. It was barely an acknowledgement, but it was the closest thing to acceptance she would ever get from him. And that was enough. She walked outside and looked up at the night sky. Somewhere out there, Marines she had trained were standing watch, protecting their fellow service members with the skills she had taught them. Somewhere, women who had been told they were not good enough were getting second chances. Somewhere, the Marine Corps was becoming more fair, more just, more true to its values. And here, in this moment, Gunnery Sergeant Maya Chun stood as proof that courage and competence mattered more than gender, that innovation mattered more than tradition, and that doing the right thing, even when it cost everything, was always worth it. 2 years later, Master Sergeant Maya Chun stood on the rifle range at Camp Lejeune, watching a new class of sniper students practice their fundamentals. The morning sun was just beginning to burn off the coastal fog, and the sound of precisely aimed shots echoed across the range in a steady rhythm. Among the students were 8 women, the highest number in any single class since the program's inception. They were no longer anomalies or tokens. They were Marines, evaluated by the same standards as everyone else. Chun walked the firing line, observing positions and offering corrections. She stopped behind a young private first class named Amanda Chun, no relation. who was struggling with her breathing control. The private shots were grouping 4 inches left of center at 800 meters. Private Chun, what do you notice about your breathing pattern? The young woman looked up, slightly embarrassed. I think I am exhaling too quickly, Master Sergeant. I am rushing the shot. Chun knelt beside her. Show me your natural respiratory pause. Breathe normally and find that moment between exhale and inhale where everything settles. The private took several breaths, then held at the natural pause. Her body was completely still, centered, and balanced. Chun watched the rifle, saw the minute's steadiness that came from proper breath control. There it is, Chun said. That is your moment. The rifle does not care about your rank, your gender, or what anyone thinks about you being here. It only cares about the fundamentals. Master those, and everything else becomes noise. The private nodded, settling back into position. Her next shot was dead center. Chun continued down the line, reaching Jessica Torres, now a sergeant and one of Chin's assistant instructors. Torres was working with a struggling male student, showing him scope adjustments with patient detail. When she saw Chun, she smiled. Master Sergeant, this is Lance Corporal Davis. He's having trouble with his wind calls at extended range. Chun observed as Torres walked Davis through the process of reading mirage and calculating wind drift. It was the same technique Chun had taught Torres 3 years ago, now being passed on to a new generation. The cycle of knowledge continuing, growing stronger with each iteration. Colonel Webb approached Chun as she finished her inspection of the line. He had a folder tucked under his arm and an expression that suggested good news. Master Sergeant Chun, I wanted to show you the latest statistics from the past 2 years of training under the Chun protocol. He opened the folder and showed her the data. Female graduation rates from Scout Sniper School had increased from 8% to 62%. Not because standards have been lowered, but because evaluations were now fair and transparent. The data showed that when evaluated objectively, women succeeded at nearly the same rate as men. Moreover, Chin's former students were excelling in the fleet. Jessica Torres had been deployed to Syria with a Marine Expeditionary Unit and had multiple confirmed kills supporting special operations. Amanda Rivers was now an instructor herself at the Mountain Warfare Training Center. Keiko Yamamoto had been selected for Marine Corps Forces Special Operations Command, one of the first women to achieve that distinction. And Sarah Vega, the woman who had been driven out by Kramer and then returned, had graduated at the top of her class and was currently deployed to the Pacific, where she was training Allied forces in precision marksmanship. This is your legacy, Webb said simply. Every one of these women, every Marine they train, every life they save, that all traces back to you having the courage to stand up when it would have been easier to stay silent. Chun felt emotion rise in her throat, but kept her composure. I just did what needed to be done, sir. Webb smiled. That is what heroes always say. Later that afternoon, Chun received a video call on her office computer. It was Commander Reeves, calling from an undisclosed location somewhere in the Middle East. His SEAL team was on deployment, and he looked tired but satisfied. Master Sergeant Chun, just wanted to give you an update. We had an operation last week that went sideways. Heavy contact, multiple casualties, bad situation. But we had one of your graduates providing overwatch. Sergeant Torres. She made 7 shots at ranges exceeding 2,000 meters in conditions that would have been impossible for most snipers. She saved my team again, Chun, just like you did. Chun smiled. Jessica is exceptional, but she earned that skill through hard work and dedication. Reeves nodded. She also told me she is using a customized M40A6 with modifications based on your original rifle. She said you taught her that innovation is not about breaking rules. It is about finding better ways to accomplish the mission. That sounds like something I would say. Chun admitted, well, it is working. The SEAL community is requesting more of your graduates for support operations. We want snipers who think like you do, who are not afraid to challenge conventional wisdom when it leads to better results. Keep training them, Master Sergeant. We need more like you. After the call ended, Chun sat quietly for a moment. She thought about the journey from that day in Afghanistan, when she had made 4 impossible shots with a rifle that Kramer had mocked as a Barbie gun. She thought about the investigation the hearing, the fight to change a system that had been rigged against women for decades. She thought about Hannah Torres and all the potential that had been lost, and Jessica Torres carrying on that legacy with honor. The Marine Corps had changed. Not completely, not perfectly, but meaningfully. The Chun Protocol was now standard across all combat specialty training. Her rifle modifications were being used by snipers throughout the military. And most importantly, women were succeeding because they were being given fair opportunities to prove themselves. Chen walked outside to the parade ground where a formation was assembling for an award ceremony. She saw familiar faces and new ones, Marines of all backgrounds and genders standing together in uniform. Among them was Private First Class Amanda Chun, the young woman she had helped on the range that morning. The private stood tall and proud, her rifle slung across her back, her eyes forward. That evening, Chen returned to her quarters and found one final letter waiting for her. It was from General Morrison, who had recently been promoted to Lieutenant General and was now serving at the Pentagon. Master Sergeant Chun, I wanted to inform you that the Secretary of Defense has approved a new initiative based on the success of the Chun Protocol in the Marine Corps. All military branches will be implementing similar evaluation standards to ensure fair treatment in combat specialty training. Your fight has rippled far beyond the Marine Corps. You have changed the entire Department of Defense. Additionally, I have recommended you for promotion to Sergeant Major and assignment as the Senior Enlisted Advisor for Combat Integration. It is time for you to influence policy at the highest levels. Congratulations on everything you have accomplished. You made the military better. Semper Fidelis. Lieutenant General P. Morrison. Chen set the letter down and looked at the rifle mounted on her wall. The same rifle that had been called a toy, that had been mocked and dismissed, that had saved 12 lives and changed a system. It hung there as a reminder that doing the right thing was never easy, but it was always worth it. She thought about young women across the country who were considering military service, who had heard her story and believed that they too could serve in combat roles. She thought about the Marines she had trained who were now saving lives in combat zones around the world. She thought about the 147 women who had gotten second chances because she had refused to accept injustice. And she thought about the future, about a military that judged people on their abilities rather than their gender, where talent and dedication mattered more than outdated prejudices, where every Marine had a fair opportunity to serve at the highest levels. The fight was not over. There were still skeptics, still people who believed women did not belong in combat, still battles to be fought for equality and fairness. But the momentum had shifted. The tide had turned, and Maya Chun stood at the center of that change. Proof that one person with courage and conviction could reshape an entire institution. If you enjoyed this story, please drop a comment and let us know your favorite part, character, or if you have had a similar situation happen to you before. Share your thoughts about moments that resonated with you, or tell us about someone you know who showed hidden strength when others doubted them. She walked outside one last time and looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Marines she had trained were standing watch. Somewhere, women who had been told they were not good enough were proving everyone wrong. Somewhere, the impossible shots were being made by snipers who refused to accept that anything was truly impossible. And here, in this moment, Master Sergeant Maya Chun stood as living proof that the rifle does not care about gender or politics or tradition. It only cares about the fundamentals: breathing, position, trigger control, wind reading, and the courage to take the shot when it matters most. She had taken that shot, and she had changed everything.